Brooklyn Solutions is a commercial value management product. There's a single platform that automates contractual lifecycle management, third-party risk management, supplier relationship management, including performance, and supply chain management. Typically at the point of either shortlisting your suppliers for contracting or at the point of contract. We help increase value and reduce risk. The Brooklyn mission statement is deal signed, time to deliver. We help organisations digitally transform their businesses through innovative, purpose-built solutions that redefine the customer-supplier relationship, through which we enable teams to maximise value for money at lower risk through automation, standardisation, best practice insights and analytics across all commercial relationships. We make sure that Brooklyn provides a holistic, full life cycle approach powered by AI insights. We aim to integrate with your existing systems and provide a best-of-breed capability to maximise business value and return on investment. Brooklyn, we've been going for several years now. Brooklyn launched in 2019, September, at the Gartner Symposium event, and we was awarded our first customer in December 2019, which was Danske Bank. Since then, we have been steadily adding more capabilities and functionality to the platform. As you can see on the slide, we now work with some great partner organisations that help not only use and design the platform, but then provide input to make sure it fits for multiple markets and multiple industry and starts to really define what supplier best practice should be. We are a VC-backed company. Our lead VC is Blackfinch Ventures, followed by Pulse Over Mass. We are looking at rapid product innovation through generative AI since late 2023. We are essentially an international business now, having started in the UK and globally expanded into the US. In 2025, we became a PwC Alliance partner, and as I said, we work with a lot of the organisations seen here. Brooklyn as an organisation is outcome focused, and what we aim to help you do is essentially get more of the green by doing more of the grey. So in case of increasing revenue, we look to help you increase resource availability by making your resource heads more efficient. Thus, on a per head basis, you've got costs reduced. And with that cost reduced and that white space created, we aim to help you improve engagement and value within the supply chain. You're not typically going to improve engagement and value in the supply chain without inherently reducing your cost of supply, because you'll notice things that can help reduce or make your cost of supply more efficient. By doing so, you're going to get better supply chain visibility. With better supply chain visibility, you're going to have the chance of reducing risk and stopping anything that's a potential risk that's going to crystallise, and increase compliance to internal or external policy and regulation. By doing that and reducing risk and increasing compliance, you're going to have less impact on profit, which in turn is going to increase the revenue. The idea is this is a flywheel, that the more of the grey you do, the more of the green you get. And we do that through a series of capabilities. So there's 4 modules within Brooklyn. There's relationship and performance, contract and commercial, risk and control, and compliance. What you can see on the wheel here is the most common use cases that we get engaged upon by industry specialists and organisations looking to better manage their supply chain post-contract. We have over 50 use cases now, so these can get exchanged out for more narrower use cases that niche industries make use of, but these are the most common capabilities we see today. We like to think of ourselves as a source to outcome product, where we help us focus on managing supplier relationships, not just from the inception of the contract, but through the entire life cycle. Where this picks up from is when an organisation decides to engage a supplier for a set of services and or products. We typically see at the beginning that the lead team there is procurement. And what procurement aim to do is increase value up to a point of signature and successfully navigate due diligence to ensure that an organisation that is engaged with in a supplier buyer model can get to a point of expected value and return of what they went to market for. What we see is various products categories come in and don't quite make it past the initial expected value and return. So for example, those softwares that sit in source to contract, very good as it suggests at the sourcing activity and getting to the point of contract, but after that the value and return drops off significantly. Procure to pay comes in a little later, gets to a point of contracting, and then from the point of contract it ensures that your supplier is still paid. That doesn't ensure you're getting any value or return out of that, it just means that you're paying your supplier regularly. Combining those two, you get source to pay. Most common source to pay platform that we see in the market today is SAP Ariba, and that typically combines the source to contract and procure to pay categories to a point of where you're getting an expected value in return and your supplier paid on a regular basis. What is pretty much universally agreed across a lot of the main research and consultancy companies is that if you have no post-contract management or no management post-signature, you're going to get a drop off in risk events or just poor management. It can be anywhere between 9% and 40%. Given all the research that we've seen, we put that at an average of 15% that's based on risk events and poor management. So the aim of the game here is to ensure that how can you close that gap of 15% risk event and get it back to the expected value in return and potentially beyond. And that's what we call source to outcome. So it's not only mitigating those risk events and getting you back to an expected value in return, it's about working with your supplier, improving that relationship, the innovation that you have across the whole supplier landscape to get to plus 15% positive value add, which gives you this 30% contract value swing that you can make using platforms like Brooklyn. We do this by leveraging lots of different capabilities. So we enable you to analyse and set up contract legal architecture as part of the contract lifecycle management capability that on an enduring basis will help you manage obligations and terms and rights within the contracts. We conduct not only one-off but periodic third-party risk management processes so you can essentially navigate through due diligence to a successful outcome with a supplier and get the assurance that they are going to be a good, stable supplier for you throughout the life of your contract. We then bring in supplier relationship management, so standard relationship governance, touch points, talking topics to make sure you're driving the most out of your relationships. We bring in a GRC element, so the regulatory alignment, making sure where necessary that you've either got internal policy or external policy or even external regulation that suggests that you have to do certain things for all your suppliers or a subset of your suppliers. We make sure that you can codify that into the platform to ensure that you are meeting those regulations. Supplier performance management, so tracking of key metrics and controls, things like SLAs, OLAs, KPIs and objectives that are agreed in the contractual documents. Enabling you to look at commercial and value management from your contract to ensure that you're not only extracting the agreed deliverables but that you're actually hitting your commercial milestones and the value that's around that from a commercial aspect that's associated with it. Before getting on to more advanced progressive controls management, so ensuring that you are applying not only just risks or known risk events to your supplier, potentially that they are going to have to deal with, but you are issuing controls against those risk events, leading and lagging controls that necessarily don't come into your agreed metrics and SLAs that are in the contract, but are necessary to ensure that they can stay in line with the business frameworks and the business operating models that they've suggested that they adhere to regularly at the point of contract. Typical things are like SOX, COBIT, ISO controls across all the different various business functions that those standards support. Leaving the team to improve their innovation and strategic growth discussions, so essentially being able to get the most out of the platform, automate most of the admin away so they can focus on the value add, high level thinking, blue sky orientated solutioning that can exist between a buyer and supplier, but they're freed up with everything that sits under it. So how can you grow each other's businesses? How can you work together to do that? Get into proper strategic growth discussions as opposed to the mundane elements of are you meeting what's in the contract? Are you meeting your SLAs, etc., which is typically where we find most of our customers and partners are at the start of our conversation. Essentially, those capabilities, except for the innovation and strategic growth, is what Brooklyn covers. Brooklyn provides all those capabilities so you can have those innovative and strategic growth discussions with your supplier. We typically see in most organisations that there is a very big step change in potential drop-off in activity between pre-contract and post-contract. And it's a point where we see a lot of risk get introduced to relationships, where an organisation typically switches from their procurement and legal departments leading, and what their procurement and legal departments have been focused on is getting an identified need to an outcome. So they identify they have a need for something, then procurement and legal help get to the point of securing a thing or a supplier or a service that will deliver that need. So they are very focused on the terms and conditions, the products and services that are being provided, and de-risking that supplier through due diligence. What we tend to see after that is the flow of data from that point through the handover process once the deal's signed to the business unit can vary drastically. What we see is teams that were there to onboard the supplier and set up the initial deal start ramping down. That in fact causes a loss of momentum and in more often cases poor handover. Delivery teams are somewhat stood up, and on occasion they are not stood up immediately and overlapping with those teams that are doing the negotiation. So you've got delivery teams stood up. There's a lag and a drop off in data from that point of the procurement team and legal team disengaging to the business unit taking receipt of that, and the translation of the legalese into operational terms that are simple enough for delivery are just missed off. So what we see post-contract is where the team comes in, that's the business unit, and the delivery element. They need to be focused on sort of in-flight obligations, where necessary conducting change control and tracking around that, effectively governing, ensuring that the compliance and regulations are met for that particular deal, and then reporting on the performance and the lie of the land, and is the need that was originally identified, is that need being delivered, and are the outcomes expected recognised at the point of where they was contracted and believed to be. And that can be quite a long period of time elapsed from need identified to need delivered. Getting this wrong comes with significant business challenges. As I've already mentioned, typically we expect there to be contract value leakage of over 10% annual contract value. If this isn't focused on, and you've got a purpose-built set of processes and platforms to undertake these capabilities, we are seeing the spreadsheets and sort of file share repositories such as SharePoint, etc. just don't cut it. They don't deliver what they need to. The problem is too vast and too large to have a platform or a technology like that to govern it. You have, with that, limited supply chain visibility. From a third-party risk perspective, if you're not only just doing a third-party risk assessment at the start of the contract and then on an ongoing basis providing that level of assurance, if you do or are unlucky enough to be part of a data breach, IBM and the Pomone Institute now average a data breach at £4.3 million to your organisation. If you are lucky enough to be in a regulated industry like the financial services industry and you get managing key suppliers wrong, there are regulatory bodies that will look to, on review of that failure, if it's significant enough, fine your organisation. But the bigger one in our minds is the missed opportunity for supply-led innovation. We don't put a figure on this, but those organisations that work with their partners and look at supply-led innovation and help or optimise their suppliers to help their business grow are the ones that significantly improve from this approach. If you was to lay the challenge out, or the operational challenge out of enterprises or even any business as such into a timeline, and this is a basic timeline to just demonstrate the complexity of what governance looks like from the start of an arrangement. You can see here that you've got things like due diligence and onboarding, risk assessment, segmentation, all processes that need to take place, and that's between the existing business units, so the SRM teams, contract owners, procurement, legal, risk, etc., and the supplier. And what we see is these are typically across various emails, disconnected spreadsheets, template, Word documents, presentations, and then all stored on a share file or a file share that represents a folder with that supplier's name and potentially a folder with that contract's name on it, and then a lot of all the material that is amassed is attached to it. However good these processes and these individual templates and documents might be, once they are completed and then committed to that repository, they are effectively then dark. They can't be continually assessed. They're not providing insight over time. There's no or very limited automation that can take place to draw your attention to that, and we just see it as a dumping ground that grows in size over time, that is never referred to unless you're being audited, and you do so under duress. So what we do is we built the Brooklyn platform, seen all the Brooklyn capabilities we mentioned earlier. We placed that Brooklyn platform between the supplier and all the internal teams that work with suppliers to be able to not only digitise and re-engineer those processes, but attach those artefacts that were previously mentioned to the timeline in Brooklyn. Brooklyn will ensure that they are ingested and available for searching, and then that insight can be drawn out from the platform based on bringing those what were sort of dark files to life and ensuring that they can be understood and analysed by Brooklyn and the capabilities that there are within the platform. As a company, we're used to integrating and onboarding at any scale. Typically, as I mentioned before, that starts with sort of legacy file imports and spreadsheets. However, that can be enriched or replaced by existing systems like sourcing systems that have an awareness of all the suppliers that are either being contracted with currently or in the past. We can onboard contract documents directly, pages in tens or the thousands, and basically against our AI trained extraction engine, pull out key terms, rights, etc., obligations, financials as part of our onboarding engine. We can issue, where there's gaps in data, we can issue intelligence surveys and assessments to collect data from either the supplier directly or the internal teams, and then feeds back into the platform to update it and make sure all the metadata required is in place and up to date. And we can all do so against a supplier landscape-wide vendor or management framework, so that organisations and suppliers can be scored consistently against a framework within the platform. Most of Brooklyn's founding team are ex-large enterprise business process and technologists, and recognised the need of what we was building would overlap with a number of products that there are out there. We wanted to do so on purpose to ensure that we could provide a decent amount of coverage to all our customers, independent of how many other tools that they have. But as such, we've built Brooklyn in a way that it has the ability to easily integrate with other third parties. On the screen here are some of the third parties we currently integrate with. It's very easy to set up. We essentially bring that data into the platform and can either just visualize it, hold and cache and store that data, or look for certain triggers and situations to arise and rules to be triggered to conduct activity off the back of that. What we wanted to be from Brooklyn perspective is not sell our platform modular. We wanted to build a holistic capability that integrates modules, and as such what we've ended up with is a single solution that can get you to 80-85% of your coverage need, as opposed to buying multiple capabilities. And we're the only with a best-in-class combined contract, relationship, performance, risk and supply data management platform that you'll find for the enterprise. We are the only end-to-end multi-play platform that covers those categories. We've got a proven track record with global enterprises, and especially within highly regulated industries. We have advanced contract management capabilities, ensuring compliance with your frameworks. We have supplier performance tracking, scorecarding and historical trend analysis, risk monitoring with oversight. We have AI-powered capabilities and workflows in the box that helps provide you with actionable decision making, but also accelerates and reduces the admin burden on your team. We seamlessly integrate with a lot of your existing systems where necessary, and we are enabled from a financial services perspective to get the organisations fully compliant with either EBA or PRA outsourcing, Digital Operational Resilience Act, or critical third-party regulations and GDPR. How we maximise adoption is what we typically see across the industry is a company will particularly go normally left to right on these boxes, as you can see on the screen. So it's very common for us to see an organisation look for a contract lifecycle management solution, and once they've got that solution in, they typically look for a supplier relationship or performance management solution. In parallel or thereafter, they look for a third-party risk management platform before then considering the wider elements of, once you've done TPRM and it's given you a whole load of risks to manage, how can you then extend that to look after and govern those risks and make sure there's a level of compliance there, before looking and getting more mature at looking at your whole supply chain rather than just your third parties. How can you extend that governance to at least your critical third parties, fourth and fifth party providers that feed your suppliers of your suppliers. Once you have all this data, you're going to look at then how you then feed or take those multi-data feed and aggregate that into a platform for either alerting or for business intelligence. And depending on which way you go and the size of your organisation, we expect you to go on a journey that's going to result in you spending either 1 to 2 million annually to be able to buy these platforms and then integrate them sufficiently and manage them. And when you consider that from an industry perspective, when you look at the adoption rates and utilisation of these platforms, most organisations will only use 20 to 40% of the capability that's in the box, which is represented by the green shading here. So when you consider that, the highest 90 percentile of organisations won't use the advanced functions within these platforms because they are just adding too much complexity. What we do from a Brooklyn perspective is we get the basics done right, and the ability for you then goes to move on from a basic implementation to get to advanced levels, but we make sure you can cover 85% of all the functional coverage within these platforms. So not only do you have a fully integrated solution that integrates all these elements, you can then have the ability of benefiting from not having to pay the estimated 1 to 2 million pounds, euros, dollars that you can see here. And for a fraction of that cost, you can then start tailoring the solution to your business and your needs, as opposed to worrying about just the plumbing that sits between all these two. So with Brooklyn, you don't have to worry about that. Brooklyn's built on a data to insight architectural principle. What we mean by that is we typically look at taking partner or customer's unstructured data, as we mentioned before, disparate spreadsheets, presentations, documents that live in various file repositories, so unstructured data, and we look to onboard that. We look to enrich it through either digital assessments by running those files through an AI-powered extraction We can bulk import some of the metadata. We can get out-the-box data feeds such as finance, credit, firmographics, email, calendar and news. And we also have an open API architecture, so we can push data to Brooklyn from any other solution that's got RESTful API architecture that can manage that and provide us with that information. Once you're past this point, you are a mapping and classification exercise. So once we bring all the data in, we map them into architectural entities or information groups. So we attach it to an organisation or a contract that might live under that organisation where there might be one or more. And then if the contracts are sort of large and complex, we have a third layer to break those contracts down into their service lines. I think where you've outsourced your whole of your technology department in a contract, you're probably going to want to manage it at the split up service level because it's the complexity and the amount of people involved. We then align users, contacts and roles to those organisations and those entities, and from that perspective we then can set up projects that are related to those entities or further sourcing activity that might be required. Once the classification mapping is taken place, it means you can target and automate the control of those entities. So against the standardised management framework that enables you to do sort of categorisation and scoring, we can set up compliance rules that are either complex conditions that help the user inform them to populate the required data that's either needed for automation later on or for regulation. We then have a rich set of policies that are available where that they can be frequency-based policies. So think you come in, you segment your suppliers. This is a critical supplier, so you're going to want to meet with them every quarter. So that's a frequency-based policy. Or you've got a database trigger where you can have an integration where you're looking for something to happen before you issue some triage to that solution. So one of the things we do with companies like Dun & Bradstreet, we can watch for the financial stress scores to drop, and if those things drop, we can then issue a financial distress survey or assessment to the supplier for them to let us know why that's dropped. Is it just a late filing, or is there actually something of an issue there that's a bit untoward? We can target all these policies at any kind of demographic, from custom tags to what segment, what business unit, what type of legal agreement it is, and we can then fire them off to any particular role or person that is within Brooklyn to help answer or enrich the data. That then, the policies trigger the event, so the events layer, be it reviews, be it customised processes, be it action items or other digital assessments that can be triggered, including as well then reporting for metrics, so periodic SLAs, KPIs, controls, or the necessary management of risks when it's time to manage risks or review those risks because they're potentially going out of their review period. All these capabilities are built on top of a rich reporting and analytics layer, so business intelligence. We've got sort of 25, 30 out-the-box dashboards to choose from. The solution that we use is very much similar to Power BI or Tableau. So if you use those platforms, the BI layer is equivalent to that. And then there's the ability for you to put, or sits on a document library layer where you can have documents held, them ingested for search, classified, sensitivity added to them, and version management and compare and differentiation. All the activity is reported to a human readable audit log, and all of this is visible to a set of microservices that make up our Ask Brooklyn module, which is our sort of machine learning generative AI solution that has the ability to have open chat discussions with a large language model, summarization, document creation, analysis, contract analysis, being able to interrogate documents through discussion at scale, which is really an accelerator and productivity enhancement. When we put that all together in how the Brooklyn interface is designed, as I said, so it's designed in information groups, sets of activities, business intelligence and administration. And you can see here those architectural groups show and represent within the menu structure of the platform. So when you log in, you see a similar view like this. You'll be able to manage organisations, contracts, services, people or documents from an information perspective. And what that breaks down into is the ability for you to create events or entities. So you can create action items, create risk items, onboard an organisation, onboard a contract, and all these will take you through a wizard-based approach to doing so. Those activities or those events as such, reviews, actions, you can set up templates, workflows and all various workflow types, risks or surveys.